Welcome to Pardon My Hunch, the show about the real decisions we make in business and in life and the gut instincts that we trust or wish we had not ignored. As always, this show is brought to you by the Vibe Method. This is a process that we use and teach innovators and marketers to help them nail a unique customer story and prove it will sell before they ever build, scale, or launch. To find out more about how we can help you nail your killer vibe for an idea before you go live, you can go to gohunch.com. All right, let's get on with the show. Today we have a special guest from Kansas City. Had to plug Kansas City. It's my anti-jinx for what's going to happen in the Super Bowl this year. Because I'm from Cincinnati. All right, on today's show, we have Mark Mears. He is the founder and chief growth officer of Leaf Growth Ventures and a lifelong marketer full of war stories and experiences and wisdom. And we've already been on a roll talking about the topic for this podcast. And my quest for this podcast is that we collect stories where people have felt their instincts pulling them in a direction. Sometimes it's in career, but usually in business, you make a decision, have that feeling. And I'm going to open with the same question I always open with. It's like when you think back over the years in your journey, you've written 2 books now, and you've got all these experiences to impart, so forth. But thinking through when what times when you've felt your instincts pulling you or telling you something, and maybe your story you want to share today is when you kind of ignored it, wish you hadn't, or maybe it's you following it and what happened after, and any tips you can share from that would be awesome. So what comes to mind?
Yeah, great topic, and great to be with you, Teri, and your listeners and viewers. I love this topic because it doesn't get talked about enough. So often, we analyze and overanalyze information, and we pour over reports and research, and all of it's good and all of it's necessary, but sometimes we miss the forest through the trees, right? We miss the fact that as humans who have personal experiences that may not show up in any of the numbers or charts or graphs, that we have the agency and we have the power, and indeed we're paid to make decisions and take a little bit of risk when it's an educated risk, a calculated risk, and think that too often people play it safe and they miss big opportunities because they're so wrapped up in wanting numbers to prove that they're going to be right, that they don't say, well, I'm being paid to make a decision based on my experiences and the use of that data and information, but also my gut instincts. And I've been fortunate to have had several opportunities where things did work out. And I'm sure if I want to go through PTSD experiences, I could think of several more that didn't.
I could.
But I would rather emphasize the ones that did. And I have both personal and professional examples that I can share with you, when you're ready.
I'm loving it. Well, I'm all in on this topic. Lifelong researcher, working at launches, all the rigor. I said earlier, like, I feel like I've become more of a coach and a counselor with my beloved corporate clients than I am anything else, because you're a consumer. What do you think? Yes, this says this, but what about what you think? And we over design the heck out of research just because we feel like we need fall guy. And career livelihood, I think, gets
right. We don't want to make the wrong decision. And let's say it turns out that it didn't work. At least we can point to the research.
Well, exactly. Let's
find a fallback. This is what gave us the direction, and it wasn't me. And I think that's a cop-out. I think
it is a cop-out.
Executives get paid a lot of money to make decisions and sift through the data and the research, but ultimately make a call, right? And so I learned early on in my career the 80% right rule.
And maybe talk about that. Is that where you're going to get? And I started off on my agreement rant, but you were going to talk about a story.
Yeah, but I'm going
Tell
to
me.
give you where it comes from.
Yeah, let's hear it.
That idea, my actually very first job, I had a supervisor. I was working for an ad agency in Dallas, and he said, you know, we've got to be quicker. We got to make decisions, and we should be able to make decisions with 80% of the information, because if we wait for 100%, which will likely never come, we'll miss an opportunity that could turn out to be a big idea that could help drive our client's business. And so that stuck with me throughout my career. And I've always believed in that. Again, so often we wait for 100% of the information, and we often miss the opportunity that might be right in front of us. That if we got 80% of the information, and then we used our life experiences to then make a decision and move forward, that's all we need to do. And so I have a personal experience that was when I met my wife. And I was a young marketing executive at Pizza Hut back in the day, and I was in charge of our NCAA partnership, and which included the Final Four. And one year it was in Minneapolis, and I was going from Wichita, where Pizza Hut was founded in 1958, till it moved to Dallas, the headquarters, in 95, I believe. And I'm flying from Wichita to Dallas, then Dallas up to Minneapolis for the Final Four.
A fun boondoggle.
Yeah, but
love
it's a
it.
lot of work. People
Oh
think
yeah.
that.
I don't mean to
No
say I don't
idea how much work and
oh, I can only
take
imagine.
care of franchisees or executives and their wives and plan activities through it. Anyway, so I'm in the gate area in Dallas Fort Worth Airport, realizing that I didn't have a rental car. So I'm on the phone trying to organize a rental car, and there was, people in the gate area, and this one young lady looked very pleasant to my eye, and I looked at her and I thought, well, okay, wow. But I'm on the phone, whatever, and now they're starting to board the plane. And I get off the phone and I'm hurrying before they close the door. I get on the plane and I'm looking down at my seat as I'm walking by this lady that I spied in the gate area. And it was on the two-seat side on the American 727 plane. And I was supposed to be sitting further back in the plane, but she started to move a coat. And I had a split second to make a decision. Do I go sit where I'm supposed to sit, or do I maybe take a chance and sit next to this gorgeous woman that I had seen in the gate area? And I did. I sat right down. And I'm thinking, this is great. But guess what? The plane's doors hadn't closed yet. So my fear was there'll be some old guy come on and go, that's my seat, son. And it was a morning flight up to Minneapolis. There were plenty of open seats, but I thought that's good. Then the door closed and they started making the announcements. And I'm thinking, this is great. Till I look over and see that she's got, headphones, and it looks like about 5 or 6 magazines. I'm like, if I don't make a move now, this might be all for naught. And I looked over and I saw that she had a bag underneath her seat, which said AA Crew. And I said, oh, do you fly for American? And she said she did. She was on that they called deadheading. She wasn't working the flight. She was going up to see her parents that lived in the Minneapolis area. One thing led to another, and we talked the whole 2-hour flight, and ended up exchanging information. And I went to see her when she's living in Dallas, and I was on a trip to Orlando. I came back through there, and we had our first date. And 4 months later, we got engaged, and later that fall, we got married. And actually, on the engagement, proposed to her on the plane. So I thought it was fitting. I wrote a poem and I thought was going to be a flight attendant read it on the loudspeaker. That asked for the order. I had the ring. I had it in the air sickness bag, and the flight attendant said, "Well, we don't really do that kind of stuff anymore." And I'm like, "Oh, well, she's one of you." Oh, that's different. Let me have that. So they took my poem, and apparently, the captain read it over the loudspeaker, and it was ironic because we were flying from Minnesota back to Dallas after I'd asked for her father for her hand in marriage, and I had written the poem like the night before. I had no idea what I was going to do, and I ended up writing this poem. At the very end of it said, "Stacy, I just got to know, will you marry me?" And anyway, the plane started clapping. Back in the day when they served champagne, they came, gave us glasses of champagne. And obviously she was very surprised. And anyway, I had a split second to make a decision that changed the course of my life, her life, and now our 28-year-old twin daughters. And so that's the point, is that sometimes when you make split second decisions, they can work out and change your life. But when you hold on to safety, or what I call FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, and delay, it robs you of opportunities that may be life-changing that you would never have had otherwise.
What a perfect acronym, FUD. Sure, anyone can relate
To
who
get the FUD out.
has had feelings,
Certain
stakes, and
doubt,
stress.
delay, right? The fear of,
Uncertainty, doubt, and delay. Get the FUD
yeah,
out.
fear of failure, the uncertainty of maybe you leaving a very lucrative W-2 job behind to start your own thing. So the uncertainty of what am I giving up for this richly imagined future? The doubts that creep in like wet cement that are in the back of your head that say, well, Mark, nobody knows who you are. You're not some famous CEO or influencer. Who wants to read a book that you wrote? Or all that then leads to delay, right? With all that, who wants to move forward? We'll give ourselves a shot of dopamine and feel good for the moment and put it aside. And again, that FUD robs us of opportunities to truly grow into our full potential. And so the good news is there's an antidote to FUD. Faith overcomes fear.
Yeah.
Hope overcomes uncertainty. Belief overcomes doubt. And action, I'll say purposeful action, can overcome the paralysis of delay.
Say the acronym again. The antidote.
Well, the antidote isn't necessarily an acronym, but it's faith overcomes fear, hope overcomes uncertainty, belief overcomes doubt, and action, and I say purposeful action, will overcome the paralysis of delay.
Got it. For some reason, I thought I missed one piece where you had mentioned that, and because there are acronyms in your books too. So
yes,
yeah, we talked about this earlier. Like everyone like nods, they feel this, but in the moment, there are constraints and blockers in terms of, and they're real, in terms of why I would say put your own feelings about something on the back burner, and then favoring whatever will make things feel safer. And in the job, in a job's like, I see this all the time. People know this thing doesn't feel right, or it's kind of off, or the direction is wrong, but they don't say anything. And oftentimes they feel like they don't have the right ammunition. And I was somebody over the years who was being paid to provide them with ammunition. Right. And oftentimes I would look at it as well and think, well, why did we kind of went into this with testing the wrong thing. And so it's like my quest is to help people just have intention to begin with. And what's a tip, I would say, with that in mind, that comes to mind for you, for somebody like in that moment, they recognize there's a fear and the resistance they're having to following or exploring this instinct over here. And they're trying, and they can tell they're going to play it safe, or they're going to ignore red flag. Do you have a tip when someone recognizes that moment is happening?
Yeah, I think the tip is you gotta jump in the pool and ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? And 99 times out of 100, that worst fear will never happen. And then you could say, look, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back to what I was doing before. So you can build in kind of your own mental safety net, but the key you have to say to yourself is, do I want to live with the regret of playing it safe my whole life? Or do I want to take a risk and feel truly alive and feel like I can grow into the full potential of the person God made me to be? And, nobody's promising it'll be 100% successful. You'll learn a lot of lessons along the way. I didn't think I was ever going to write a book. I didn't think I was going to leave a very lucrative, C-level career and go into solopreneurship, um, it, it was foreign to me. And the easiest thing in the world would have been saying, no, I'll just keep, making money and, retire at some point around age 65 or whatever, which is the old myth. But I got to thinking about legacy. And it's a big word that is often misunderstood. And most people think of legacy as something, maybe a value you bequeath to some people after you're dead and buried. And I believe in a living legacy, which is how you spend every day. I don't know much, Teri, but I do know this. There are 24 hours in a given day. Not one of us is given 1 minute more or 1 minute less. And so how we use that time to not just pursue our own goals, but what I call paying it backward is where you're helping others along their growth journey. To me, that is the measure of a full life. And I wrote a purpose statement as I was writing my first book on the purposeful growth revolution. I thought, well, if I'm the purpose guy, I better have my own. And so I wrote, I don't want to just make money and retire. I want to make a difference and inspire. And that means making a difference in the lives of others and inspiring them to want to do likewise. And that's something called the law of reciprocity. When someone does something nice for you, you feel a deep-seated urge to do something nice for somebody else. And I call it paying it backward. I'm a big, growth junkie, as my title suggests. I love growth in all of its forms, personal, relational, spiritual, and obviously professional. But I also love to learn about it, but also to share what I've learned with others. And so I'm also a coffee junkie. So I'll go to Starbucks in the drive-thru and I will order my coffee, and I'll get up to the window and I'll say, hey, can I pay for the car behind me? And they'll go, oh, that's so nice. Yeah, and their order is whatever it is. And I'll just tell them, please just do me one favor. They go, sure, what? Just tell them, God bless you, your debt has been paid. And then I'll drive away and I'll say a silent prayer for the person behind me. I don't know them, they don't know me, but I got to believe, Teri, in that moment, they feel seen, they feel valued. And I'm told that not random, because I do it every time, that intentional act of kindness is often reciprocated as that car feels led to pay for the car behind them and the car behind them. And I'm told by people at Starbucks that is exactly what happens.
Oh,
that to me is what it's all about, right? Paying it
little
backward,
things, right?
helping others along their growth journey while continuing to try to fulfill whatever plan God may have for your life.
Well, the little things too, I think are, unfortunately you don't always see the impact, but it's just, you have to believe that just little acts of kindness or little decisions, little feelings you have to do something and you do it are going to lead to good things for not just you, but for others. I mean, don't we all want to have an impact? I just think the worst thing that anyone can feel during any experience, but I would say especially from a career standpoint, is to feel like they made no impact, that all they did was work on average stuff. I mean, like, you and I were talking about sports earlier and having to, you're from Kansas City, I'm from Cincinnati, right? Like, so I mean, there were 30 something years of mediocrity in our football franchise. And I'm like, I think I'm happier when we're terrible than when we're average. I mean, I want to love to hate somebody and blame them for being terrible, but back to work though. I mean, like, it's proven like the biggest force motivator in humans is like connectedness and wanting to have an impact. Like, we want to feel like we're making meaning. I think I'm borrowing that from Donald Miller, who wrote the book Building the Story Brand. Making meaning. Okay, epiphanies. I know there was the story. I think you've just inspired people to go for it and proposing to someone, but or asking someone on a date. What you mentioned also, we were chit-chatting earlier about a couple epiphanies you've had on the business side of things. Like that, I think there was one that led to your book, right?
Yeah, actually, the first book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution, and you can see the images of what looks like a hand reaching up to these leaves, and it came from an epiphany I had the morning after I was let go from a president of a $500 million casual dining chain that was in Southern California. And I was recruited from my position as chief marketing officer at the Cheesecake Factory to take on this role. And the goal was to turn the brand around. It was double-digit negative in sales, do research to prove a new concept that would make the brand a little more contemporary and youthful and vibrant. And then also test a new concept that could earn the right to capital. And I'm a competitive guy, and I said, wow, I mean, the Cheesecake Factory is still probably one of the best brands I've ever worked for, with the best team. It was just a magical experience on so many levels. But I wanted to test myself to take the next rung up to become president of this unit of a publicly traded entity and build the team and create the programs that would allow us to turn the brand around and do the things I just mentioned. We did that within 2 years. And instead of the parent company who said, if you earn the right to capital, we've got plenty of capital, instead of them investing in us and doing the plans that we had tested and were having great results behind, they said, well, the board's decided to move in a different direction. In other words, they're going to, put you up for sale and kind of, strike while the iron's hot. So, but don't worry, Mark, you're going to lead the sale process, and I'm sure whoever buys you will keep you and your team on because you've done such a great job with this turnaround. And lo and behold, we thought we found our perfect match. It was not a private equity firm. It was a true organic play that had restaurants in our space, that knew our business, and we thought we could even learn from. And the deal closed on a Friday, and we're drinking champagne and celebrating over the weekend. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I've got a meeting with the CEO from this entity, and we're going to plot our future together. We had this meeting planned for a couple of weeks. At 8:05, I'm out the door. We've decided to move in a new direction. I said, what, over the weekend?
Yeah.
They probably knew all along that they were going to insert their own management team, and everything they said they weren't going to do, they did. So I'm out the door, literally, and it was only 5 minutes because it took me 4 minutes to get my jaw off the floor and ask a few questions. And so then this was February 20th, the next morning, February 21st. After a fitful night of sleep, I get up, take the dog out back, and this is, again, not in Kansas City or Cincinnati, but in Southern California, about the time the first signs of spring start to emerge. Well, we had this fig tree in our backyard that was barren from the 5 or 6 or 7 weeks of winter we do get in Southern California. But Teri, there on the end of one branch was this tiny little green sprig of a leaf just starting to bud. And it was in that exact moment I got this epiphany that a leaf is a symbol of growth and rebirth. And I took the dog in, I went into my office, I started banging out a treatment for this idea of leaf. And I remembered leading with the rule of threes. You've probably heard of it. If you focus on 3 things, people will be able to wrap their brain around it, be more productive and higher quality of work, and focus, right? My 3 things were leadership, engagement, and accountability. That was my mantra. Everybody knew that. This is how we're going to turn this brand around, through strong leadership, up and down, sideways. And we need to engage people's heart, heads, hands, and habits. They got to be all in. And we need to hold people accountable for results. We're part of a publicly traded company. And so I actually made it part of my weekly communications. I use it in recognition and reward. I'd say, Teri's doing a wonderful job of leadership. Look at her team and what they're accomplishing. Or she's engaging her team on a deeper level. Look what they're doing. Or holding her team accountable, and they've turned the results around in her market. I wrote that down on a piece of paper, and I said, what was missing? How come that wasn't a very fulfilling experience? We were burning the candle at both ends. I was commuting, staying in a hotel from where we lived in one part of LA area to the Orange County area, just sacrificing for this noble cause. And what was missing? And I wrote down fulfillment. And then in my mind's eye, as I'm looking at that piece of paper, leaf starts to emerge. Leadership, engagement, accountability for sure, but fulfillment. So leadership represents the seed and the root. You got to have strong root system or any plant will wobble, just like you have to have strong leadership in a company. Engagement represents the trunk, the branches, and the system of nourishment, which I've learned is called savia in Spanish. Translated to English, that means lifeblood. What's the lifeblood of any organization? It's the people, right? Accountability represents the leaf and the fruit of a given plant. In that case, that fig tree's purpose is to grow fig leaves, where all growth happens through a plant or a tree is through the leaf, through the magic of photosynthesis, right? We learned from science in high school or middle school.
Science class, yeah.
Right? And so that fig tree only knows how to be a fig tree. So the idea is for it to bear that fig leaf, but also to grow fig fruit. And that fruit is not only sustenance for people and animals, but also inside has seeds that can be scattered for future growth. And then fulfillment represents the culture or of an organization, but it represents the ecosystem, the soil, the sun, the rain that allows that photosynthesis to occur so that fig tree can grow strong and tall and bear maximum fruit. And I started mapping all this out. And at first it was like a PowerPoint presentation. I didn't know what I had, and I had some time off after what happened to me. And then the more I kind of socialized it with people, they said, Mark, this should be a book. I'm like, oh, well, I'm not an author. And I delayed. I put it off, right? But I kept coming back to it. There was a nudge. It kept saying, there's something here. There's something really powerful. Because people said, Mark, I've read a lot of business books. And I've never heard of leadership books, with this kind of a framework that looks at nature and sees patterns and possibilities that we miss. And they're all around us. You should make this into a book. And so I did. It took me 8 or 9 years off and on. I got my next job. I'd put it away. And maybe on a weekend, I'd get up early and start working on it. Or maybe on a vacation. And, I'd off and on until I started to really build out the outline and get excited about it. And fall of 2022, it was published, and I'm happy to report it hit bestseller on Amazon and it served as the foundation for speaking and consulting opportunities. But 4 months after that was published, I had a new epiphany. And I was working on my LinkedIn newsletter, and it was the month of February. And I just wrote down the word, love. In February, I wanted to be seasonally relevant. It is Valentine's Day, the season of love. And so I just wrote down love. And in that moment, I literally wrote down, listen, observe, value, and empower. 4 fundamental human needs we all share, but often don't find in the workplace. We all need to feel seen and heard, right? Valued for who we are as a whole person, not just as a worker, right? But also importantly, empowered to grow into our full potential. So that became what Love at Work, the second book that was published just this last fall. But even then I put it off. The next February rolled around. I got even more research to back up this idea. And I got more positive comments on LinkedIn. People said, you should make this your second book. I'm like, oh no, I'm one and done. This is just a kind of a cool, fancy, idea that, and they kept saying no. So later that year, I said, you know what? I think I'm ready to write another book. I will tell you, Teri, writing a book was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. You had to follow that nudge, that gut, that spurred you into thinking there's something bigger here. And if you don't pursue it, you will regret for the rest of your life that you were given a big idea, an epiphany, and you decided to just, put it in the closet or shove it under a rug. And so that drove me to then a lot quicker this time. It took me a year to write this book. All the research, all of the studies and everything that I'd read, everything that I've experienced personally, people I admired. I wanted to create a curated reading experience to where people could put the human back in human resources. And I say to do that, all we need is love. Listen, observe, value, and empower.
I think the listen and observe are my favorite parts because we all skip to the value and empower, but the two that come before it, you need those two to get to the others.
Well,
right?
it's the what, the how, and the why. So if we go
Yeah.
into my model of, listen, observe, value, and empower, you've got listen how, graciously, to do what, build trust with your team. We all know trust is the most fundamental success trait of any relationship, right? If you can trust your leader to have your back, all of a sudden now you're going to be more open, more engaging, and you're going to feel like you belong. And then observe generously to invest in your team. If you've ever been in a situation where someone is invested in you, it makes you feel pretty darn good about yourself, right? And then
Oh yeah.
finally, or not finally, the next value is the idea of value gratefully to appreciate your teammate. And we could stop there, but I think this is the most powerful one. Em- Empower generatively to help grow your teammate. Again, help them grow into their full potential. If 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 a leader were to lead like that, you wouldn't have quiet quitting or quiet cracking now with the mental health issues that are going on, or what we now hear is job hugging, because people may hate their job, but because of the economy and the job market turning the other way after COVID, they need the job. In all three of those instances, it speaks to lack of engagement. People not feeling fired up about what they're doing at work. They're lacking purpose, and they're lacking the feeling of belonging. And so I'm a big believer that words matter, and I don't like the word culture. It's thrown around a lot,
I hate it. God, I
misunderstood.
hate it. I'm glad someone said that. It's
Well,
just
I
they're
prefer
building
the
on
word
their hype
community.
word.
Community, if culture is a place you merely feel a part of, that's not bad. But a community is a place you feel you belong in. And when you feel like you belong, I go back to DEI, and right now it's seen as politically charged and even weaponized. I think people are missing the importance of diversity, of ideas, of thoughts, of lived experiences that can help innovate and grow firms. But if you have diversity, it just gets us in the door. That's good. Equity gives us an equal voice, better yet. Inclusion gets us a seat at the table. Holy cow. But if you don't feel like you belong, you're likely not going to feel psychologically safe enough to give your very best. You don't want to get thrown out of the room that you worked so hard to get in, or in that seat, or to have that voice. And so you tend to just kind of shy away from saying anything controversial or something that may sound silly or maybe not well thought out. And that gets back to this idea that we're talking about of hunch, right? You can't share your hunch if you don't feel psychologically safe. You don't want it to boomerang back and hit you if you say
Exactly.
something that may be controversial, or maybe you're challenging the status quo and saying and questioning things that probably should have been questioned a long time ago, but you feel like you can't do it because you don't yet feel like you belong.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's a whole topic in itself. Like I think
Hmm.
it is on both parties, right? To it
Two-way
takes
street.
two.
Yes,
And I think
two-way
there's a
street,
lot
like
of
any relationship, right?
it's a job relationship, and there are assumptions that people are making that are not that are misinformed, that are not correct. And also, if it's not a fit, sense it and do something about it, right? So like I tend to kind of push people in the roles. If you're complaining all the time about where you are, maybe think about this not being a fit for some reason, and that's okay, rather than,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
feeling frustrated, like, because we all want to make an impact, right? And be believed in.
I think most people do. Some may just, they haven't yet found this inner drive, this purpose that gets them up on Monday mornings and gets them to want to feel good about what they do. But sometimes that's because they didn't get the best leadership, and so they
Yeah.
feel a bit victimized, right? But we're all in charge of our own lives. We can make a decision to say, this isn't working, I need to leave and go somewhere else, or what can I do different or better, to your point, being a two-way street. So we were talking earlier about this notion of where does it come from? And Myers-Briggs was a personality assessment I took early in my career, and I was an ENTJ. I took it not that many years ago, later in my career, and it changed. I became an ENFJ. So I went from thinking to feeling. And I think, I think it's from a softening, more comfortable in my skin than maybe I was earlier in my career when I tried to fit in and I wanted to make sure I was seen as a thinker and I'm looking at data and analyzing, making decisions. And now, as we're talking about, I believe in the 80% right rule. And I learned over the course of my career, based on all my lived experiences, I'm like, I've seen this problem before. Here's how we addressed it here, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't. And no amount of research was going to prove whether uh, I was going to make the right decision the next time. I had to own the decision and the outcome. And I believe that's why executive leaders get paid what they do, not to play it safe and just paint by numbers, but to see a bigger picture and pick the colors and the techniques that are going to create this masterpiece that no one could have foreseen otherwise.
I think there's earned wisdom, right? Like, and it's easier the more reps you have, the more experiences, good and bad,
Right.
the safer you. It's just it becomes part of your DNA to trust your instincts more because you have this case. I mean, like I had somebody recently challenge me on this and say, like, yeah, and that's why right now I don't have any experiences yet, and so I feel like I have nothing to lean on. And I'm like, I don't know, think like a lawyer who has a case where there's never they have to look for a precedent, or they have to
Right.
look for an analogy, because there is no law or like there's gaps in the law to support this claim or what have you. That might be the way to do it. Like find something out in the world that has similarity to what you're feeling and maybe use that.
I
It's
call it a best practice mindset within a spirit of continuous improvement. To your point, there are people out there that are best practice. Who can you learn from? Right. I remember when I was head of sales and marketing at Universal Studios Hollywood, our president had us pick brands that we admired that were relevant in our particular space. And then we would go research them and figure out what could we learn from them, even if they were not in the theme park industry, right? But what could we learn from the way they handled things that were relevant to our particular area, me, marketing and sales, somebody else research, somebody else digital and online, and then come back and we did papers and we shared with each other. We all got smarter because we looked at different businesses. And I remember hearing about Southwest Airlines and thinking, well, how did they grow from this little, puddle jumper, Texas-based airline, years ago to now who they are today? Well, they realized their business model was based on going short hauls, right? So they knew they had to win on timeliness and efficiency of getting their planes, deplaned and replaned and gassed up and restocked so they could get on to the next town, right? And so there was no other airline out there they could study. And so what I learned is a bunch of executives went to a different model to learn. And you know where they went? NASCAR. They
oh,
went to NASCAR to study how they get the cars in and out of the pit so efficiently. And they were like, how can we leverage the lessons from NASCAR to now make Southwest be the most efficient, on time, safe airline? And oh, by the way, how do we do it with a sense of Southwest spirit, personality?
I love
That's
that's
how they
such. Oh
grew.
my, yeah, I can't. I'm sharing this one. Oh my gosh, because I've lived and grew up in a world of we need a norm or comparison, for this metric, et cetera. And, then it's a vague sort of thing that we're comparing to, and we still wonder, and all this as that story goes. The best analogy is 100% transparent. Like it is, a lot about this thing you're comparing to. And usually it's not, it's the same, I have a cookie, I need to look at another cookie brand, right? Like
Right.
it's something that they did to improve or change or win that may have nothing to do with cookies at all, right? Like in this case, it's awesome because like it's kind of adjacent, it's still a moving vehicle, if you will. But I mean, it's like they knew it was the speed, right? And of the change.
Based on their business model, right?
Yeah.
So here's your outcome, your output. You may be, flying, you're an airline, right? Or you may be driving a NASCAR or whatever. But we, our gal that was in charge of research, when we were looking at kind of building a loyalty program, she studied, Harris, who were one of the very first to come up with a guest loyalty program in Las Vegas. And, there's some parallels for sure to our theme park model and what they do to attract people to go and stay there and gamble there and all that. But there were so many great examples. I know in mine, I used Target back when they were really growing as a brand, because I really admired how they were all in with the color red, the red dot.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All their ads, it was the look, tone, and feel was consistent. And we were just moving to a new brand positioning as Universal Studios Hollywood as the entertainment capital of LA. And so I'm like, what can I learn from what Target has done so brilliantly to help us be successful with our new branding campaign? And how do we make it integrated and aligned across all aspects of our guest experience? That's a retailer, right? But I looked and studied what they did and how to apply it to our business at Universal Studios Hollywood. And our team came up with several ideas based on that exercise, right? And I thought that was pretty innovative. I mean, how many, presidents or CEOs would take their team on a journey knowing we're already working 12, 13 hours a day with our day job, right? But to give us a time and space to think outside of our day job and then incorporate the learning to make it even better and more fulfilling and more successful. I thought that was really revolutionary.
And I love it. I mean, I think the best, I get the most inspiration from people or business cases, what have you, are not in my same space.
Right.
From people who are doing things way outside of what I'm trying to do. I think it's human nature then. We don't get distracted by trying to make, compare too closely. And it just allows you free thinking too. But there's also the analogy is how, not the what, right? Like, and I think that's what's so cool. I mean, you're right. Oh, sorry. Gosh, I remember I guess I'll go to Walmart. That was kind of what we had back in the day. And then, all of a sudden Target comes around and I'm going in to get one thing and coming out with a $200 receipt of all the other things. I mean, I just think everything was done.
They created a shopping experience.
Yeah, they really did. And you're right with the assets. I mean, my gosh, like the branding was just so on point. Like anyone who yearns to, it's like we all know consistency and all the things you want. And you want your personality, all the things we talk about. And, I'm not a branding expert. I'm more on the messaging side, but still, like, we all understand the science behind it. And when a brand does it really well, you're like, oh, yeah, look at that. I love it.
Correct.
Oh, gosh. Well, oh, my gosh. I could keep talking. We might have to do another. We have to have you on again.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I really enjoyed talking with you today. I enjoyed our conversation, and I always learn something new when I am able to interact with a smart person such as yourself. So thank you.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. I feel so honored to have you there's so many experiences to share. I've written down like 20 things. And on that note, for anyone who listens or might see a clip from our talk today, what's the best way to get in touch with you? They're from just kind of to swap ideas, potentially, buy some consulting from you about your books. Where should we direct people?
Yeah, I'd say let's start with LinkedIn because you can look me up, Mark Mears, on LinkedIn, and follow me. I'll follow you. Let's get connected, and then you can subscribe if you're so inclined to my monthly LinkedIn newsletter. But I also invite you to kind of look underneath the hood and go to my website at markamears.com.
Markamears.com.
Because I couldn't get markmears.com. So it's markamears.com. And there you'll find ways that we can connect on a deeper level. I do speaking, consulting, but there's also an assessment tool at the very top of the page. It takes about 5-6 minutes. And there's one that's tied to my new book, Love at Work, that'll essentially, and once you answer the questions, there's only 20, But you'll understand better how well you feel loved at work. And if you're taking it from a leader's perspective, maybe you answer with the idea of how you perceive you're doing in each of those areas. Listen, observe, value, and empower. Are you building trust? Are you investing in your team? Are you appreciating them as whole people? And are you empowering them to grow into their full potential? And then what I do is I'll do what I call a love gap analysis. So if your company wants to take your, middle management team or whomever, executive team even, then what I'll do is I'll create this gap analysis and then ultimately show where there's opportunities to close the gap. The idea is not a gotcha. The idea is to start a conversation.
Yeah.
So often we don't feel comfortable. We don't feel psychologically safe telling and I hate the word boss, but if someone's truly a boss and earns the title, then they're a boss. Yeah. I prefer the word leader. That's a title that's earned every single day by how you show up. But if you're not feeling invested in, if you're not feeling like you can really say what's on your mind, and you haven't built a relationship to where trust is present, you should be comfortable having a conversation in a one-on-one, right? Likewise, your leader should be comfortable saying, "Hey, Teri, I've been watching you, observing you, and the last few meetings, I really feel like you held back when I thought you had a good idea and you could have taken it a bit further. Now you feel invested in. I took the time to coach you and give you some positive reinforcement. I don't like the word criticism. I use the word critique because that's taking a to-from approach, strength to strength, or from what I've observed to what I see are opportunities for you to grow and even be a better leader, right? And having those conversations now creates that psychological safety. And now when you do have an issue, you'll feel more comfortable being able to express yourself and not feeling fearful that maybe it'll boomerang back on you, as I mentioned earlier.
Oh, wow. I love it. And then, so markmears.com.
Yes.
There's a quiz there. Is it called Love, or what is the name?
It's just a love assessment. So it's just an assessment tool. But like I said, I know you're a researcher. I would love for you to take it and give me some feedback. But once you take it, then I will then send you back an email that includes a PDF that shows your scores as well as some helpful tips in each of the areas. And there's a separate one if you scroll down that's tied to the first book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution. And it's similar type of format. So those are the kinds of ways that you can at least begin the journey. Some people are like, gee, where do I start with purpose? I don't know if I feel like I'm on purpose or not. I know I want to be, but how do I get there? My first book will basically walk you through it step by step. And then what has love got to do with work? Well, love in general, it's designed to be provocative, right? But the idea behind it is very human. And we need to put the human back in human resources. With all this talk about AI taking jobs and, digitization and machine learning, and we've got to put the human back in human resources. And it's not human resources' job to do that. It's a leader's job to do that. And so Love at Work will provide you with the tools to be the leader you wish you worked for.
All right. markmears.com. I love it. I love the concept of love at work.
Nice.
Hey, we spend too much time in our job for it not to mean something. And so all this BS about it's just a job, work-life balance. I mean, we all want work-life balance, but like I spend way too much time here to not be getting something out of it personally, right? Like, no.
The research states that of millennials and Gen Z, 89% of them want purpose in their work, not just in their life. They want to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves or just punching in and out and getting paid every other week, right?
I mean, we all do. We all want
exactly.
That. They did the research among the youngins because that's what everyone's doing now. We all want that.
Absolutely.
So human. We all want that.
And we're wired for connection.
Yeah.
And yet so often people feel disconnected at work because their environment, their culture is not a community that makes you feel like you belong in. And that's the part that I just have to stress. This is not some airy-fairy, cotton candy, tree-hugging, seal-loving, soft approach to management. It is absolutely the right approach to get the most out of people, to where they're going to want to give you a more discretionary effort, do higher quality work, be more productive, stay longer in their role, and oh, by the way, say good things about your brand. It's that net promoter score, right? And I think that once you do that, the results just exponentially get better and everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
It's been awesome. As a reminder to everyone listening, the show is brought to you by the Vibe Method. That is a process we use and teach innovators and marketers to help them nail their unique customer story before they ever go live. We call it nailing your vibe before you go live. So to find out more on that, you can go to gohunch.com. The link will be in the show notes. And until next time, always remember the worst thing you can do with a hunch is to ignore it.